edition of the Common Sense Professional. I'm your host, Marie Weiss, and I'm here with my co-host, Chuck Ingram. And we are about to do another podcast dedicated to helping business professionals grow their business in a common sense way. Today, our guest is Jim Barnish.
So this is Chuck Ingram. More importantly, Jim Barnish is the founder and managing partner at Orchid Black. Best name ever. We will talk more about that. Jim is actually one of my favorite entrepreneurs and thought leaders that I've encountered. Full disclosure, Jim and I had the pleasure of working together, which even more cemented what I think about him. We came up with what I thought were some pretty cool and disruptive things at an awesome company called TriBridge together. Jim makes me think of when my son was small, he used to ask me questions and I would say, Connor, what are you? And you go, I'm resourceful, Daddy. And it helped shape what he is today. And I think Jim's dad must have said to him, be curious, because he's incredibly creative and curious listener and problem solver. And he develops amazing systems and frameworks around that for solving for growth. And he founded a firm called Orchid Black. They're a boutique advisory firm. A lot of high-level folks, CEOs, CROs, CMOs, strategy execs, board members, and they're all about accelerating growth and value, adding value. I love frameworks. Jim has some amazing frameworks and some common sense insights on growth and value creation. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Marie.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Perfect comments.
So, Jim, I got a question for you to start off. You and I have something in common. I started my firm Congruent X right when the lockdown started, and at the same time, you were already underway with your firm, but you did a huge rebrand at the time. So, two-part question: why the rebranding? Why then? And sort of what did you learn during that time of the rebranding and the same time that lockdown was happening and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Let's start there in terms of lessons learned and journey around the rebrand. But what the lockdown gave me a chance to do was really get in touch with our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and how our brand was resonating with them, given some of the pivots that we had made in the business away from working more with private equity firms, which we had initially done, and more towards working with founder-led innovative companies that are founder-led and founder-owned. And what I found was that we still looked like that stodgy old private equity firm, attorneys for hire. It was a company called Morgan Hill Capital Partners. The brand itself, the name, everything just kind of didn't really resonate with these guys. Bring some incredible growth opportunities to the table and creative problem solving to drive growth for innovative founders. And so in talking to them and getting some of that feedback, it was hard at first, right? Mm-hmm. It was, we built this brand that had this, great reputation in Tampa and in other areas, other markets. But it really became a necessary evil to do a strategic rebrand that would position us with, our ICP, our true ideal customer profile. And so in doing that, we worked with an agency. I brought in somebody who was able to kind of lead the internal efforts, our CMO, if you will, that was probably almost fired me more times than I almost fired them, given how challenging it was to go back and forth and get me to switch and position the way that I was looking at the brand. But ultimately, we really landed on this brand called Orchid Black. And how we got there was a hell of a journey. But the reason that one simply stuck is there are a number of elements that connect to the brand. Number one is we work with companies that are in the black or profitable. Orchids are flowers that, when tended to properly, can grow to the highest of heights. And that's what we tend to our companies. We cultivate growth and drive growth within our companies that we work with and partner with, which is essentially just like an orchid when tended to properly by botanists. And when we look at the most exclusive orchids, those are the black orchids, which are also indigenous to Florida, like us. So, putting all those things together and getting some customer feedback and some, feedback from the market on how that resonated compared to that old stodgy Morgan Hill Capital Partners brand, it was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer. Now, the journey was not a no-brainer. And again, it's funny with seeing other CEOs and founders that are thinking about a rebrand or thinking about how their brand is resonating with the market and having those conversations. That commonality around CEOs and founders working with marketing executives, whether those are internal or external, and the pressures that puts on both the relationship in some cases and on the need to change is fun to talk about on the other side of this, and exciting to see the growth that's happened in our company, which had no small part in to do with the rebrand.
Awesome.
Okay, so I got to jump in here. Chuck, can I jump in here? I know you have a two-part question, so I feel badly, but I'm just so dying to ask this question. I'm one of those marketers who works with founders and works with a lot of people, and I know how challenging this is. But the question I have for you is, you talked about some feedback you got. What was the data or the evidence you used to suggest that your brand wasn't resonating with the people you wanted to sell to, and that it might have financial impact on you? Did you come to that moment where you said, and I love this line that other people have used with, especially when they talk about the founder culture and startups and everything, and they say, people will fall in love with what they are at the risk of what they need to become. And it's very hard to move them out of that area if they've fallen in love with who they are. And I work with tons of companies that, are very profitable, doing well after 10 years. And I tell them, you're not resonating with your buyer persona. You're not resonating with your audience, but they've fallen in love with who they are and they stuck their heels in and they're not moving. I'm dying to know what date, or what was it, a pivotal moment where you lost a deal? Was there something where you actually said, okay, this just isn't working anymore, I got to change this?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it connects to Chuck's part too, which is, the connection of the journey as a whole. Number one was, so our business model is all about aligned compensation, right? Most of our fees are taken as equity or some sort of value creation percentage of where a company's at today and where we can take them by partnering together. So great business model, right? Totally aligned incentives, everything that you could want as long as you can perform, which we do. But at the end of the day, the selling proposition to founders around wanting a piece of the pie versus just the cash fee is new, right? That's not something that consultants do. And so building that trust and that partnership is critical. And so what I found is the time to get to that conversation, the time to build that trust, was taking longer even with existing customers than it needed to, because the message wasn't resonating around this private equity looking brand and the messaging that was being told towards what we were saying during the sales cycles and ultimately once someone became a client, because of that evolution, where the brand was and where the brand needed to get to. And so it was long sales cycles, longer than needed to be. It was direct feedback from customers that have been with us the longest, and people. I've got a pretty great founder network, founders that were not customers that I was soliciting feedback from, and sometimes unsolicited, which was the especially hard part. So those kind of two factors drove me to really dive deep into some customer discovery of where the brand needed to get to and how it was resonating with all of our customers in the market. And that was hard. Connected to Chuck's second part, like that was God. It's weird when somebody tells you, especially when you're in the business of growing companies, and somebody tells you why your business isn't growing as well as you thought it would, or why it isn't growing as fast as it could. Especially when you're experiencing 100% plus year-over-year growth, right? Which is in most businesses is great, especially services businesses. But when you're getting told it could be 500% year-over-year if you were just doing this a little differently, that's hard. And so I got a taste of my own medicine, right? got told why my baby was ugly for less of for choice words there. But it was really those factors around long sales cycles, lack of clarity around ICP that had been stuck from the old brand messaging, and ultimately doing some really hard customer and market discovery to see where the gap was that we were missing.
Okay, I just got to call this out, Chuck, if it's okay. I got to call it out for our listeners and say, I'm going to distill it down into two things here because I think our listeners need to hear this. So first of all, what you're really saying is a well-articulated value proposition can shorten a sales cycle. Mm-hmm. And if it's not well-articulated, it makes the sales cycle longer, and it doesn't need to be. And I think you putting a number on that and just identifying it right there was hard to hear, but you understood that. And I just think it's fantastic that you said, okay, then let's do something about it. I've seen too many companies too often say, oh, I don't like our brand because I don't like the color blue, or I think we need a new logo, or I think we need to get those golf shirts made. And it is not about that. And even after all this time, and I've been in marketing for 30 years, and even after all this time, I still think, and this is going to get to the next point you were making about the difficulty in executing this program for you. I still think people don't have a clear enough understanding of what marketing is. And Chuck and I have talked about this so many times. Marketing needs to start a conversation. And if it's complicated and people have to click in 50 places to get the information, or they have to read through some things, or they have to get on the phone and talk to somebody to understand it, they're not willing to do it. So the fact that you were able to see the line between A to B is fantastic. And I think that's a great learning for all of our listeners, and great. Thank you for sharing that. That is invaluable. I've seen too many people, either do branding for the wrong reasons or not do it because they're afraid. Mm-hmm. So as you said, okay, we're doing it, we're going for it. You came up with this fabulous name. What was your next sort of major roadblock? What kind of stumped you as you were trying to develop this and roll it out?
Yeah, a few things. I mean, so I've got two managing partners that all come at it from different angles, which is what makes us great partners, right? Stephen Horowitz and Howard Joyce. And so, it's not a CEO run business, right? It's a 3 managing partner run business. And, the perspectives that we're coming in with were different, and getting alignment around that perspective was critical. And I would be lying if I said we rolled this out flawlessly with a fully aligned perspective, right? Right around that same time, I got engaged, and my fiance was telling me, because I wasn't even talking about it in the way that I wanted to be talking about it, and I'm talking about it today. What the hell, Orchid Black? What does that even mean? I hear what you're saying. I hear the words you're saying, and I know I'm not your ideal buyer, right? But WTF, right? What are you actually trying to get across here? And my partner Steven rolled out to his wife, same feedback, and so we were all rolling it out a little bit differently than the rollout plan was, because of that lack of initial alignment around the why, around the connection there. And I would say I see that a lot, whether it's with a new brand rollout, or a product rollout, or a CRM rollout, or a marketing launch a product launch, marketing new strat, whatever it is, right? That level of alignment of here's what we're doing and why, and let's push this out. Let's get internal alignment before we bring anyone in the market to the table, is something I see and I solve for all the time. It's just it's different when it's you, and so we didn't have a rollout that consultants helping us roll that out, right? We rolled it out ourselves, and I think one thing I regret is that we didn't have external help in the rollout, because it would have helped to really drive that message forward and do the things that we do with our clients, but for ourselves, because everyone needs that little bit of expert level guidance.
So speaking of, that's very cool, by the way. Speaking of, you talked about one of the first things you did was get better at honing in on who your ideal client was and how to speak to that person. For folks that are listening to this, what are 3 things you would recommend, to get closer to understanding who their ideal client is?
Yeah, I mean, the first is talking to your customers, the ones that love you, right? Not all your customers, because they don't all love you, but talk to the ones that love you and figure out why.
Yeah.
That's like something that so many companies miss. That's so easy. Like, it's so easy, right? And then figure out, not just why they love you, but why they're willing to pay you so much. And especially the ones that are paying you the most and getting the most value from that same thing. Like, put the equation together, figure out the customer journey that's worked really well and double down on it. And then, ask for feedback from people that aren't customers, because customers typically know a lot and know a lot about what they see in you, especially your evangelist customers, but they don't know everything. And oftentimes there's things that are selfish motivations for what they're going to say in those discussions. So you really want to gauge the market and what the market is seeing value from beyond just your customer base. And those, I mean, if you tighten those up and figure out where the value is, you've already got it. And there's a demographic component or firmographic component to that, which is, how big is the business, what kind of revenue they have, what are the problems they've got, right? Things that are really simple and straightforward. And then there's the psychographic component, which is like what makes them feel, right? They are humans at the end of the day, whether you're B2C or B2B, you're dealing with humans on the other side of the table. And so make it human. Focus on behaviors. What behaviors are you trying to change? What are you trying to shape? And ultimately, the value will become extremely clear and simple.
Makes good sense.
Common sense.
That's right.
Exactly.
Do you want to align your marketing, sales, and service with IT for better business results? CongruentX has a proven formula to help you get CRM right in 30 days. Please visit congruentx.com and get congruent. CongruentX, people, technology, aligned.
Okay, so, this was going to be my next question. Thank you for giving me the opening for this. It makes sense what you're saying. Why do you think so many people get it wrong?
Because it's simple. All the things that are simple in this world are the things that people complicate, which makes everyone get it wrong, right? It's like, oh, well, I got to do more tactics, right? I got to do the next thing. Someone gave me this idea and I got to go execute on it, right? It's not, it really boils down to common sense at the end of the day, which is, let me experiment with some things before I get set on a strategy, right? Once I've got some validation of what that is, what those experiments are and what's working and what's not, let me double down on the ones that are working and still do a little bit of tinkering and experimenting behind the scenes, but connect it to a strategy that's going to grow my business. And whether that's your value prop or, marketing experiments or sales experiments or anything really along those lines, never stop experimenting, but make sure that you stick to the strategy at the same time. And I think that's a two-sided thing where typically people are usually doing too much of one or the other. And it really boils down to being that simple at the end of the day.
Well, you're a man after my own heart, Jim, because I always say to people, anybody who comes to you and says they're a marketing expert is lying. There's no such thing as a marketing expert. There are seasoned marketing testers and seasoned marketing experimenters who understand the strategy and then need to try things. And it's really a journey today. It is not, it's this old cliche, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I think people get tired quickly. I think they get scared quickly. I think, I came up during this thing called the internet and applying it to business sales. And I remember when people could just buy a keyword and drive enough leads to their business because they bought their way to the top. And you can't anymore. You can't do any of that anymore. And people think, well, what, it's almost like a mentality like, why do I have to change? This worked before. It's just going to keep working. But they don't realize that there's got to be a series of experimentation, and then people get exhausted. Marketing traditionally, I think, sits on the expense side of the ledger, not on the revenue side of the ledger. And not enough marketers know how to tie what they're doing on the marketing side to revenue. So that's why I asked you, where did you think the incremental lift in your business was going to be if you went and rebranded? Because obviously it's expensive, it's time consuming. As you've pointed out, it could be a total headache. But, I think people have to, and that to me is just common sense. But, a lot of people are doing other things. And I know, Chuck, you see that on the sales side as well as you're implementing CRM and you're trying to figure out what the sales process needs to look like.
There's the.
What are you tracking?
Sorry, I was just going to say, just to yes. And just to piggyback on top of that, right? I think there's this metric that has been such a problem in the industry that was meant to be such an opportunity and is called an MQL, right? A marketing qualified lead, where there became this drastic misalignment around this term MQL. Like marketing's trying to get MQLs, sales dealing with SQLs or sales qualified lead. What ties those two together, right? I'm giving you all these qualified leads, and now, but sales is saying, oh, these aren't qualified leads. But
they're not so good.
They're not so good, right? So like, what about, would it be crazy of having a sales accepted lead to tie that together, right? And so many businesses don't understand that gap and is driving so much misalignment between marketing and sales, and even enter the conversation of the CRO or somebody owning revenue operations or revenue generation as a whole, right? That doesn't necessarily solve it, bringing that person. It's how are people being compensated, and how do those departments work in unison? And it really is that simple of focusing on a sales accepted lead that ties together MQLs and SQLs, right? That's one of those examples of something so simple that I think 95% of businesses miss out on.
Oh, you are so right. And Chuck, I know when you go in to work with a client and I go in to work with a client, one of the first questions we ask is, what's your definition of a lead? Yeah. And nobody has an answer for that.
Of course not.
Right? Nobody knows how to answer the question. You ask marketing, they might fumble around. Well, it's a name on a list. It's there's a lot of fumbling around. And Chuck, I know you've experienced that.
Absolutely. And I actually was thinking about a little bit higher level thing is I mentioned earlier, I love frameworks. Like I'd love to look at like how somebody's solved the problem 3 or 4 times. And it may be leads that you and I talked before, Jim, and you have these growth pillars: strategy, talent, product, revenue, operations. I'd love if you could talk about that, and if there's a single place where you see people struggling. And like you said, it may be defining a lead. Would love to hear you talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so we define the world, as Chuck mentioned, according to 5 pillars: strategy, talent, product, revenue, and operations. And it really boils down to being as simple as, for software companies, which is who we serve, you create a strategy, you hire talent around that strategy, talent builds a product, right? Product then drives revenue, and operations facilitates and is the backbone of allowing all that to happen, right? It's like really that simple at the end of the day, from genesis through exit, right? And what people don't realize is that's actually the way that businesses are valued too at the end of the day. They're valued off of a pyramid where operations is kind of table stakes, right? Multiple of EBITDA, things along those lines. And then revenue, which is, things like quality of revenue, right? Customer concentration, things along those lines. But there's 3 layers above that are really where a lot of the value in transferable value to the acquirer is had, which is product, talent, and strategy. Strategy being at the very top, and quite frankly, the most important, and why you see businesses actually getting acquired for 20 or 30 or 50 times revenue in some cases. It's not because their revenue is that great. It's not because they've got incredible EBITDA. It's because there is strategic value in what that is. And so connecting those 5 pillars to what should matter most in a business is actually needs to be end to end, from the creation of a company to exit, and the 4 stages in between, which we think of as discovery, right? Figuring out who the hell you are and getting your first customers. Validation, turning those customers into recurring customers. Experimenting a lot to try to figure out exactly where the efficiencies are. And then moving into efficiency. So discovery, validation, efficiency. Building processes for scale, exponential growth along those lines. And then finally scale, right? It's really that simple. So create a company, exit a company. You got 4 stages: discovery, validation, efficiency, and scale. And when you align those four growth stages, if you will, to the 5 growth pillars, you can actually put a methodology together pretty simply around what to do and when to do it. and what that means. And so that's as simple as it gets from our methodology perspective. Is for software companies, although every company is a little different and experimentation looks a little different and strategy looks a little different, there really is a methodology for every stage of a business and every discipline within those 5 stages or within those 5 pillars. And where businesses miss the most is strategy, because that's really like that's what drives the rest of the business as a whole anyway, right? If you're not aligned there, you're not going to be aligned anywhere. And so that's, we first focused on getting that alignment around what the strategy is, things like who the ICP is, right? Where the value is for customers. And we connect that all the way from where they are today to where they're going to be or where they need to be when it comes time to exit. And that's why we love basing our compensation on the net between the two, right? It's like, it's easy conversation with the founders saying, let us help you take you from here to here. And we'd love to be part of that from a compensation perspective, rather than charging you a bunch of cash fees where you don't know what the value we're going to provide is. Let us prove it to you, right? Let us align our incentives. And so strategy is the biggest place people miss, but honestly, it flows down to all growth pillars, because if strategy is not right, there's a good chance there's gaps in the rest as well.
The nature of the digital buyer journey today means that earning trust is more important than a sales pitch. Take the mystery out of building a marketing sales funnel for your technology business by downloading our guide at marketingcopilot.com. Marketing Copilot. Find customers, keep customers.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And when you then bring in sales and marketing and the strategy is absent, they're mucking about trying to figure out who to reach out to, how to do it, what the message needs to be, and what's the differentiation. The toughest thing that I think people struggle with is, where's their differentiation? Yeah. Where is their unique value that they're going to bring to the market? And there might be 20 other competitors in the space, but if you really understand your unique value, which is tied to your strategy, then that's how you're going to be able to communicate. And if you can't do that, then everything else just becomes expensive tactics, and you're wasting time and money if you can't get that right.
And you begin overcomplicating things, right? Like those simple things that you're talking about, those common sense things. 99% of companies, or 95 or whatever the number is, are overcomplicating it because they don't have that figured out first, and wasting so much time and so much money on things that are ultimately never going to lead to success unless they get lucky, which is, that's luck is not a strategy.
Where do they goof up? Do they go buy fancy tools? Do they spend too much time on the color of the logo, or is there a common place where they goof up?
Yeah, it's those are all tactics where a lot of people goof up. But what it really boils down to is, with the companies we work with, which are typically between 3 million and 50 million in revenue, most typically between 5 and 20 million in recurring revenue, they mess up by hiring people like them, and the rest of it just forms, right? Brilliant technologists that build a great product that, has some elements of product market fit, some early customers. One of their customers might be 40 or 30 or 50% of their revenue. And they see that as a good thing because it's driving the product in direction and things along those lines. And then they keep hiring more great tech people. And they're growing revenue at a place that might be sustainable for them, or might be, decent, but nowhere near what their competitors are. And then all of a sudden, they're not growing, or growth slows, and they're like, what are we doing wrong? Well, you hired a lot of people just like you, and you're really smart. You got a lot going on, but you've got some gaps in your business. You connect that with not a clear strategy, and start bringing in people that aren't just like you, that aren't just looking at you as the father of the company, and a big familial culture like a lot of startups grow, and that's great. But once you start to switch that into a growth stage mentality or growing focus mentality, it's disaster, because you don't have the fundamentals right. And no business wants to acquire a business that doesn't have the fundamentals right.
So it sounds like that if you find people who think differently and you kind of amplify those strengths, it might be a little bit painful from time to time. And you talked about your journey. The other side of that is scale and all kinds.
Yeah. Absolutely. You bring different minds to the table. You can build on ideas, right? It doesn't mean like they're going to have a better idea than you. It means that they're going to have a different take on your idea, that then you're going to have a different take on that evolution. And ultimately, like, that's kind of what high performing teams are, right? It's like actually being a team.
Right.
It's not having a pool table or a ping pong table or a vending machine in your office. That stuff is cool, right? But that's not culture.
No. I'm so glad you said that. That made me laugh. Yeah, that's so right. You're so right. And I think, it just seems so simple, but to your point, it gets missed so often. This is the part of the show we like to do the Fast Five. So we have 5 questions we want to ask you, and we're going to run them down. So I'll do the first one, Chuck, and then you can do the next one. Favorite tech or business tool for growing or running your business?
Anything that has dashboards. I lean towards a CRM, which I love, HubSpot, or Monday, or a project management tool like Monday, just because I think they've built for scale, which is awesome, and built for companies that are growing. And they've got great dashboards. But honestly, anything that can give me a really simple look into the business is the goal for me.
Awesome. Okay. So who out there is crushing it in marketing? A company that you look up to that's crushing it in marketing?
But HubSpot. I mean, I never read anything that isn't great content from them. They always they're experts in providing great tools that allow you to do things on your own, which oftentimes leads to people realizing they can't do it on their own. And provides a lot of value for those that just need the tool, right? Which is ultimately what this is about in this world. Like, give people the tools and resources. If they can do it on their own, great. If they can't, hire the experts. And that's what so many companies miss, I think, is like not giving away their secret sauce. Like, if you can get secret sauce from a template you put online, you have no secret sauce.
I love that. Your favorite, most recent read?
I love a lot. I have this opinion that a lot of the best business books all come from a core of, 20 or 30 books that I tend to read on an annual basis. And some of them are less businessy, more just human behavior, more people oriented. And I think one of the books that on the business side that's just so core, book by Aaron Ross called Predictable Revenue. And I think one of the books that's more people-centric and just kind of, we use a lot of design thinking tools, is really anything that focuses on the combination of human behavior and design thinking. And I lean on a lot of the ones that are by Strategizer, which is just kind of one of the, I forget who the author is, but anything that's by them definitely got a golden stamp on that.
Excellent.
Awesome. What's your favorite sales strategy?
Having one.
Yeah.
No.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Favorite sales strategy is for companies that are again in that couple million range where we start to get involved, at least something there, some great customers. I think where they're oftentimes missing the boat is 2 things. Number one, they're expecting their account executives to do everything from prospecting all the way through closing, and they're wondering why it's not working. And so implementing a BDR or SDR, business development representative, or sales development representative program for SaaS companies is just so key, and to do it right. And so that's number one. Number 2 is leveraging channel partners, whatever that might mean for the business, like leveraging indirect channels to not have to do all things direct is something that is an opportunity in almost every business, and is a major opportunity to reach some scale. Obviously, a lot of work to get that in place. But those 2 things, one more on the direct side with creating predictable revenue through SDRs and BDRs, and then the other one, leveraging channel partners. Those are probably the 2 I lean on the most.
Speaking of giving, their podcast is one of the best ones around. I mean, they tell you everything. And of course, he's got a book, at least one, the one I've read, Predictable Revenue. But cool.
Yeah.
Our last question in the Fast Five. Most important business result you measure your success by?
If you look at our strategic plan, it's two things. It's general happy customers, and the metric around that is as simple as just having an ENP or an NPS score, and an ENPS score for happy employees. Those are kind of tied hand in hand because your employees actually are the people making your customers happy. If you're doing it right, it shouldn't be you. And then the other one is because we take so much of our compensation as equity, it's growth of equity positions. So we value those every year around, what the growth is that we're doing with our clients and the value of their company. If I'm looking at this down the road, it's the value of the data that we're getting. It's private company data at this stage is not being tracked right anywhere. You got PitchBook and all these great CB Insights, all these great tools that have valuation data and market comps and things like that. And people pay a fortune for that, but it's not really about that at the end of the day. Like that doesn't get to the heart of why they're valued that way. And so, we track the operational data, which is what drives all of that, right? And forming insights from all the companies that we're working with. And when you pull this trigger, what happens here? When you make this and change this input, here's what happens to the growth of the company. We could write 1 million books on that, which I'd love to someday, or at least write one. But the data that we're gathering is what fuels the ability to have those books in the first place, which is game changing for the whole world of private equity and private business purchasing. That I would love to change the world in that way, because I think the whole industry is in need of a significant change.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for being on the show today. Amazing insights. As I say, you're a man after my own heart. You've seen it. You've been there, especially on the marketing side. And I think you've shared a lot with us. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and you simplified it for us. Thank you.
You bet. Common sense. Love the name.
So you've been listening to another episode of The Common Sense Professional. I'm your co-host, Marie Weiss.
I'm Chuck Ingram.
And happy sales and marketing, everyone.
It's just common sense.